Camera speed.
Sound production, take one.
Action!
Welcome to From Beneath the Hollywood Sign. If you love old movies, Hollywood history, or the golden age of filmmaking, you've come to the right place. This is the podcast that talks about amazing stories of Tinseltown from another era. Hear fascinating conversations with writer-producer Steve Cubine, who quite literally lives just beneath the Hollywood sign, and actress-writer Nan McNamara. Now your hosts, Steve and Nan.
So Steve, one of my first apartments here in Los Angeles was in Los Feliz, and it was one of those old buildings where the front door, you had to have a key to get in the front door. And one morning I got up to go to work and I couldn't find my keys. Couldn't find them anywhere. And I just was going crazy because I couldn't leave the building without my keys.
Oh, right.
Because I wouldn't be able to get back in.
Yeah.
And for some reason, it was either, a premonition or the Holy Spirit or something said, call your mom. My mom, who is over 1,500 miles away. I did call my mom. I said, Mom, I can't find my keys. I don't know why I'm calling you. She said, what were you wearing yesterday? Did you have a coat on? And LA in the spring, it can be cold, it can be hot.
Yes.
Sure enough, the day before, it had been very cold. I had a warm wool jacket on. I went to the pocket, and there were the keys.
See, Mama knows best.
Mama knows best.
Mom's intuition is always right.
So that's a little tribute to my mom, because we are today on the podcast celebrating Mother's Day by talking about some good mothers in cinema, which would have been my mom if she had been a film actress.
Of course it would have.
Or some bad mamas.
Oh, there's some bad mamas on this list. Well, this is fun. We are who we are because of our mothers.
Yes.
And this is our chance to celebrate cinema mothers for Mother's Day. So we've got some great ones to talk about.
I think we should start with a good mother.
Always start with a good mother.
Yeah, right. You want to go first?
The first mother that I wanted to talk about was, God, I love her performance so much. I'm going to talk about Ma Joad, played by Jane Darwell in the 1940 film The Grapes of Wrath.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Of course, The Grapes of Wrath was directed by John Ford. It was written by Nunnally Johnson. It was based on the John Steinbeck novel. It stars Henry Fonda and John Carradine and Charlie Grapewin and John Quellen, and of course, Jane Darwell as the ultimate mom, in my opinion. Of course, The Grapes of Wrath is considered one of the greatest films ever made. It's always on everyone's top 10 list of best films ever.
Yes.
It's the story of the Joad family, which they're this impoverished family of sharecroppers in Oklahoma who lose their farm during the Great Depression in the 1930s. So to survive, they endure this treacherous journey across the country to California to work as migrant workers. However, once they get to California, the California gold ain't so gold, and they are met with more hardships and more exploitation, because I think in that industry of migrant workers, there was a lot of exploitation that happened that they experienced. But through it all, the glue that keeps the Joad family together is Ma Joad. She's played with salt of the earth earnestness by Jane Darwell. I mean, you just look into those sad, droopy eyes of hers, and you know this woman has sacrificed. This woman has known heartache.
Yes.
But yet there's such a twinkle of hope in that woman's eyes that no matter how bad things get for the Joad family, and along the way they get pretty bad, Ma Joad is going to make sure the family is cared for and supported and they stay together. Mm-hmm. She is sort of the ultimate mom of movies.
Yes.
She values her family over everything, and she'll sacrifice anything for her family. She always seems to know what to say. She knows just how to support and encourage her children who are going through various personal issues of their own. Mm-hmm. And even when Pa Joad, who proves to be maybe not the best leader of the family, when it becomes obvious that Pa Joad is failing, she very quietly and gracefully sort of takes over as the family leader.
Yes.
Which was a beautiful thing to watch.
Yes.
It was so skillfully done by Jane Darwell. For me, there's just nobody better than Ma Joad.
That's a great choice. I have not seen that film in a while, so I need to go back and revisit that.
And it's funny because Ma Joad to me is just warmth and love. And then a few years later, I think in 1943, she plays one of the lynch mob leaders of the the Oxbow incident. Yes. And she's so despicable.
Yes.
I'm like, Ma Joad, how can you be so awful?
How can you do that? Just a testament to her
it
abilities
is
as an actress.
A great testament to what a skillful actress Jane Darwell was. So that's a good one to start with.
All right. I'm going to dive right into my first choice, which is Mrs. Miniver. Greer Garson, 1942, directed by William Wyler. We just heard his son David Wyler speak at the Turner Classic Movie Film Festival, talk about The Good Fairy. Written by Arthur Wimperis, George Froschel, James Hilton, and Claudine West, and based on a collection of short stories by Jan Struther. We've touched on this movie in the past. It won a lot of Academy Awards, including Best Picture, Best Director, and it has some of our favorite character actors in Henry Travers and Reginald Owen. It's a propaganda film, no doubt about it.
No doubt about it.
Many people credit it with consolidating American support for the Allies. I mean, even Winston Churchill was quoted in different ways as saying the film was worth either 5 battleships or 50 destroyers. It had that kind of effect on, the country and really on the world. And the plot really is a family living a comfortable life in Kent, England, and they learn to cope with war as the war encroaches on their life. What I really want to talk about is Greer Garson.
Yes.
Who is the center of this film. She gives a seemingly effortless performance. She plays, obviously, the title character, Mrs. Miniver. She's this very unpretentious, comfortable housewife with a loving husband played by Walter Pidgeon, who she would go on to star with in 8 more movies.
They were so good together. Such great chemistry.
They really were. She has a nearly adult son in the picture who was off at Oxford and comes home because war is imminent, played by Richard Ney, who we've talked about previously as well.
Well, we've gotten into that a little bit, I think.
Yes. And she also has 2 other small children. Now, the arrival of the war shifts the whole world from innocence to acceptance of it, and then ultimately so much sacrifice. So you're watching this graceful, elegant woman navigate life and death circumstances, and it's probably the role most people associate with Greer Garson. I think she played a number of mother roles. She even called herself Metro's glorified Mrs., which I thought was really funny. But here's the thing about her in this film, and this is why she gets my Mother Award. She not only fights a Nazi, she has a rose named after her, and while in a bomb shelter with the war going on literally right above her head, she knits a sweater, she quotes Alice in Wonderland, and when her traumatized child cries out, "Mummy, they nearly killed us this time, didn't they?" she's still able to comfort him.
Now, that is one cool and collected mama.
It is a very cool and collected mama. And so she gets my Best Mom award.
And you know what I love about her performance is mother-in-laws get such a bad rap.
Yes.
And she is so lovely and gracious and kind to her daughter-in-law, played by Teresa Wright.
Yes.
That you almost feel like she treats her like her own. Which
really
is kind of a beautiful and rare thing to see in movies.
Yes. And of course, Greer Garson and Teresa Wright both won Oscars for their performances. It's a lovely movie. Most of you, I'm sure, have probably seen it, but it's definitely worth a revisit if you haven't seen it recently.
Oh, I love that one. Good
Let's
one.
move on to some baddies.
Oh, where do we even begin?
Where do we begin? I can't wait to hear what you've got.
Okay, my first bad mother.
I love that
My
sentence.
first bad mother is going to be Ellen Barrett Harland, played by Jean Tierney in Leave Her to Heaven.
Okay.
1945, directed by John M. Stahl. It was written by Joe Swerling, based on the Ben Ames Williams 1944 novel. Of course, the film starred Jean Tierney, Cornell Wilde, Gene Crane, Vincent Price, Mary Phillips, Ray Collins, and a young Daryl Hickman. It was nominated for 4 Oscars, including Best Actress for Tierney, which was her one and only Oscar nomination of her whole career.
Really? That's surprising.
I know, which is surprising. And it won 1 Oscar for Best Color Cinematography.
Okay.
It's basically the story of a woman who, as her mother says to her soon-to-be husband, she loves too much.
You don't want that kind of mom.
You don't want that. And the mom is actually trying to warn this husband that maybe her daughter's a little obsessive and compulsive and a little crazy.
I see what you're saying. Okay, yes.
So how it all comes down is novelist Richard Harlan, who's played by Cornell Wilde, he meets this beautiful socialite from Boston named Ellen Barrett, played by Gene Tierney, of course. It's love at first sight. What could possibly go wrong? Well, that's when Mama comes in, and Mama's, kind of pulls Richard aside, and she just says, Ellen's just a little bit obsessive, and she has maybe a compulsion to love too much, which is quite an understatement.
That's code. That's code for run.
Exactly. So basically, Ellen goes all fatal attraction crazy on Richard, and anything or anybody that gets in the way of her man, she is going to put an end to it.
Okay.
And that includes her husband's beloved teenage brother, played by Daryl Hickman, who was crippled from childhood. It includes her own cousin, Ruth, played by Jean Crane, who made the mistake of having a little too much in common with her husband.
Okay.
And it also very tragically and very sadly includes their unborn child.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Is there a bunny in the stovepat?
Well, unfortunately, the bunny is the little brother. In this. Well, I'll just say this. If you ever drop your kids off at swimming lessons and Gene Tierney is the teacher, run. That's all I'm going to say. I don't want to spoil too much. But Gene Tierney's character, Ellen, is crazy. I mean, she's so obsessed with her love for her husband that she literally tries to destroy anything in its way. It's a masterful performance by Gene Tierney. It really shows you the depth she has as an actress, which I don't think she got challenged a lot in a lot of her parts.
Right.
But this one really, really challenges her, and she just rises to the occasion. After she played so many heroines and noble leading ladies, it was so much fun to see her as this purely evil, morally corrupt villain. And so she gets my bad mother of the year, or at least one of my slots.
All right. Well, one of my I love that. I can't wait to see that. One of my bad mother of the year awards goes to Angela Lansbury as Eleanor Shaw in The Manchurian Candidate. 1962, directed by John Frankenheimer, written by George Axelrod, based on the novel by Richard Condon. Now, this is a film where the plot is very key, so I'm not going to say much about it, because if you haven't seen it, you must go watch it right away. But in addition to Angela Lansbury, it stars Lawrence Harvey as her son, 3 years younger in real life. Frank Sinatra and Janet Leigh, and again, fabulous character actors. And it was famously remade in 2004 by Jonathan Demme.
It was.
Starring Denzel Washington, Liev Schreiber, Jeffrey Wright, who I forgot was in it, and Meryl Streep. I loves me some Meryl Streep. But you have to see the original.
You have to see the original. The remake was fine.
Yes.
But there's nothing like that original.
Yeah, it really didn't need to be remade, in my opinion.
No, not really.
So what I will say about the plot is it's about Raymond Shaw, Angela Lansbury's son in the film. He won the Congressional Medal of Honor in Korea. He and his platoon were kidnapped by the Chinese and Soviet communists and brainwashed so that he could serve their plan for world domination. Basically, that's what happened. And his mother may or may not have had something to do with that. But I digress, because really this is about Dame Lansbury. She was nominated for an Academy Award for this performance. To say her relationship with her son is complicated is putting it mildly. I mean, she ultimately uses her son in a horrific way. However, she's also devastated as to what happens to him, and she does plan to get back at the people who did it to him. So there is that. But in the scene where it's kind of the climax, or close to the climax of the film, where she's directing him into what he's ultimately going to do, she gives a master class in that motherly control and quiet, seething strength. And let me tell you, if you pull up that scene, Angela Lansbury does not blink. She does not.
Literally?
Literally,
Wow.
she does not blink.
Wow.
And it's, it's a beautiful speech. I mean, it's a sick speech, but it's amazing. So the scene ends with her kissing her son, which is a lovely thing to do, right? But not in the way that Angela Lansbury does it. I mean, like I said, it's complicated. Now, in doing some research, Angela Lansbury herself talks about Frankenheimer discussing the kiss with her and saying, make sure you put your hands around your mouth so that the censors won't say, no, can't do it. So she did do that, which gives it even more of a weird twist, because you don't know what's going on behind there.
And it's like, that's such an intimate gesture.
Yes. Yeah, it really is. JFK was actually shot shortly after this film came out, was released, and because the subject matter was a little too close to home, it didn't get the release that it really should have, and it was never fully recognized in the way that it could have been.
Way ahead of its time, I thought.
Way ahead of its time. Angela Lansbury even describes her role as one of the most evil women in film history. So is she a narcissist? Yeah, probably. Does she love her son?
Questionably.
Yes, questionably. She certainly is willing to sacrifice him for her belief in her country's future. Lansbury is just this quiet power that she exudes. You do not want to mess with that woman.
Yeah, most people think of Bed, Knobs, and Broomstick and Murder, She Wrote and Mrs. Potts. This ain't that, Angela Lansbury.
No. I mean, between this and you put it up against, I think it's her first film, Gaslight, and you're like, this woman, ooh, she is a force. She is a force. So that's my that's my bad mommy.
One.
All right, I think we need to clean our palate. How about a good mom?
All right. My next good mom is actually Mama, and it's Irene Dunne's character, Marta Hansen, from I Remember Mama. 1948, George Stevens directed. It was written by DeWitt Bodine from a stage play by John Van Druten. Of course, it stars Irene Dunne, the fantastic, anybody who knows me knows, one of my all-time favorite actresses is Irene Dunne, and she is exquisite as mom to this brood of Norwegian immigrants in San Francisco at the turn of the century. The movie also stars the lovely, and so many people don't realize what a great career she had before she was Miss Ellie on Dallas, but Barbara Bel Geddes plays the daughter. And of course, Barbara Bel Geddes was the original Maggie the Cat in Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, but had an incredible career before she ever hit Dallas.
Right.
But it also stars the incredible Oscar Homolka, Philip Dorn, Sir Cedric Hardwicke, Ellen Corby, and Barbara O'Neill, who we all know played Scarlett O'Hara's mother in Gone with the Wind.
Quite a cast.
Great cast. It was nominated for 4 Oscars, including Best Actress for Irene Dunne, which was her 5th and final Best Actress nomination. She never won. I know I harp on that all the time.
I know, but we need to just keep banging that drum.
It just chaps me every time I even see it. But also, they were nominated for supporting actor for Oscar Homolka, who was incredible, and also supporting actress for Barbara Bel Geddes and Ellen Corby as the cousin who gets married. It's a story told in flashback. It starts with Barbara Bel Geddes' character reading an essay she wrote about her family, who I mentioned, they're Norwegian immigrants living in San Francisco. And it's a flashback of what her family life was like. Not a lot happens in this movie. It's not like there's wars to overcome like Mrs. Miniver or things like that, but it's just the everyday, ordinary life of this immigrant family. It's the heartaches, and it's the struggles, and it's the triumphs, and it's the love this family has for each other, all set in motion by the love and understanding of Mama, played by Irene Dunne so beautifully. She keeps this firm but loving hand on her household, which includes 4 children and a devoted husband played by Philip Dorn. And they even bring in this highly educated lodger played by Sir Cedric Hardwicke, who reads Charles Dickens to the family every evening. Aww. So Mom wants to expose her children to art and culture and just to better them for the future.
Right.
It's just this beautiful depiction of this tight-knit family. Dunne gives such a compelling performance. She'll just do anything to help her family, any sacrifice. And there's one of my favorite parts is the character that Barbara Bel Geddes plays is graduating from high school. And she sort of brags that her mother's going to buy her this fancy dresser set. And Mama finds out about it. So she ends up selling her beloved heirloom brooch in order to be able to buy this piece for her daughter. Well, the daughter finds out the sacrifice that Mama made, so she takes the furniture back, she gets the brooch back, gives it back to Mama, and of course, for her graduation, Mama gives her the heirloom brooch.
Oh my God, I'm going to cry right now.
I know. It's just a beautiful movie, and Irene Dunne, it's just perfection.
Yes. Oh, wow. Well, speaking of tearjerkers, my choice, Stella in Stella Dallas, the amazing Barbara Stanwyck.
The best.
1937, written by Sarah Y. Mason, Victor Heerman, Harry Wagstaff Gribble and Gertrude Purcell from the novel by Olive Higgins Prouty. It's directed by King Vidor, produced actually by Samuel Goldwyn, whose son would go on to produce the remake, Stella, with Bette Midler in 1990. But the original, folks, it stars, it's untouchable, and it stars some of our favorite, again, character actors, Alan Hale and Marjorie Main among them. This was nominated for 2 Academy Awards. Barbara Stanwyck was nominated, as well as Anne Shirley. Another one did not ever win. Thank you.
Yes.
Story of a millhand's daughter, played by Stanwyck. She marries into a wealthy family, Stephen Dallas, played by John Bowles, and she just can't quite become that fancy lady that Stephen Dallas wants. She's got a loud laugh. She's got bad taste in clothes. She's got lower class friends. None of it fits into his world.
Some of those costumes, by the way, are fantastic.
They're fantastic.
They're so gaudy and over the top.
They're amazing. Stephen and Stella do end up having a daughter, Laurel, and she becomes everything to Stella. They ultimately, Stephen and Stella, end up divorcing. Stephen remarries into a wealthy equal, and Stella makes this decision. This is really going quickly through the plot here. But essentially, she decides that she wants her daughter to have everything, all the advantages in life. And
everything she can't give her.
Exactly. Yeah. And the only way she feels that she can do that is by stepping aside and stepping out of her life. Stanwyck as Stella is at her courageous best, not only because of her performance, but as you mentioned, the costumes. She really went for it. She ages between 15 and 20 years. According to my research, she bleached her hair for the role. First and only time she ever did that. Usually they wore wigs. She wore wigs. But she is quoted as saying she wanted to be able to put her hands through her hair and do things with it as the character. Some of her scenes are wigged, but most of them are not. As you mentioned, she wears these tacky costumes. She also was padded in the film. As the film goes along, her torso is padded, her legs are padded. Now, in 1937, not many actresses of her age and stature would be willing to let themselves kind of be put out there that way. And she knew how important it was to the character, and that was it. That was the end. One of the most heartbreaking final scenes of all time. I watched it again last night as she's standing outside the home looking into this huge picture window, watching her daughter get married, tears in her eyes. Police officer says, "Move along, lady, move along." She begs him to let her stay so she can see her face when she is kissed by her now husband. And Stanwyck's face, the camera's on her. It's filled with a mother's love and sadness and joy. And now I'm crying and you're crying and we're all crying, and the police officer says, "You really do need to move along." And she turns and she's got this handkerchief in her mouth and she's kind of pulling on it out of the corner of her mouth. And you see, I could cry right now actually thinking about it. You can see her making that sacrifice. She's sad, but she's happy because she knows what she's done for her daughter. Yeah. And she's made the ultimate sacrifice. Stanwyck herself called it a once-in-a-lifetime role, and it's a performance that just can't be topped in my book.
Oh, and I so agree with you. That final shot of her, I don't know any other actress of the era who could have pulled that off as beautifully as Barbara Stanwyck did.
Yes.
That heartbreak yet joy, all in one.
And in 1937, the style of acting could have moved that into a whole other melodramatic thing. And I'm not saying the movie doesn't have melodrama.
Or in the hands of a lesser actress.
Oh, absolutely.
It could have been such a over-the-top, hammy, overblown moment.
And that scene holds up today as some of the finest film acting ever.
I totally agree.
Well, we just have so many good and bad mothers. We have more to talk about. Let's jump into our Hollywood pop quiz for this week.
Yes, and we've talked about an actress in a couple of movies, and in fact, Barbara O'Neill, who played Scarlett O'Hara's mother, Ellen, in Gone with the Wind. She's also in I Remember Mama, which I mentioned, but she's also in Stella Dallas. She plays the new wife of John Bowles. Well, the question of the day is about her. And of course, everyone knows her as playing Scarlett O'Hara's mother. Here's the question, and I love this. How much older was O'Neill than Vivian Leigh, who of course played her daughter, Scarlett O'Hara?
Okay, this will be great.
It's an interesting casting choice.
We'll be right back with more bad and good mothers after this.
All right, Steve and Nan will be right back, but first another stop on the Hollywood tour. You already know that not all silent film actors were able to find success in talkies. There was no guarantee. Well, Rudolph Valentino was a huge sex symbol in his time. His nickname was the Latin Lover or the Great Lover. And the silent film actor was so popular that when he was leaving the New York premiere of his 1926 film, The Son of the Sheik, he was swarmed by his fans. They even ripped at his clothes. It was a near riot. 2 weeks later, he suddenly collapsed from a ruptured appendix. He underwent surgery, took a turn for the worse, fell into a coma, and died just a few days later. More than 100,000 people gathered on the streets outside the place where Valentino's body was being prepared. The scene was so chaotic, NYPD officers were brought in to restore order. Some Valentino fans were so depressed they reportedly committed suicide. And the Polish actress Pola Negri, who claimed she would have been Valentino's third wife had he lived, melodramatically swooned over his coffin. She cried exaggeratedly and even fainted more than a few times. Valentino was only 31, but his early death meant we'll never know whether he would have successfully moved from silent films to talkies. By the way, we tried a silent version of this podcast. It just didn't work out very well. Now back to Steve and Nan from Beneath the Hollywood Sign.
Welcome back, everybody. Before we dive into some good mothers and bad mothers to celebrate Mother's Day, we wanted to give a shout out to our listener of the week, Yvonne Amantea. Yvonne, thank you so much for listening and for telling your friends about the podcast.
Thanks, Yvonne.
All right, you are up, my friend.
All right, I have a bad mother for you.
Okay.
You can't make a list of bad mothers and not mention Ma Jarrett from White Heat. As played by Margaret Wycherley, there's just not a more evil mother around. And of course, White Heat's from 1949. It was directed by Raoul Walsh, the great, written by the incredible duo of Ivan Goff and Ben Roberts. It's based on a story by Virginia Kellogg. Obviously, White Heat stars James Cagney and Virginia Mayo, Edmund O'Brien, Steve Cochran, Fred Clark, and John Archer. Who's the father of Ann Archer, by the way.
Oh, wow.
It was nominated for one Oscar, Best Story for Virginia Kellogg, which is surprising. I would have thought it would have had more Oscar love. It's the story of Cody Jarrett, of course, played by Cagney, who is this ruthless, psychotic criminal and leader of the Jarrett gang. He's got this unfaithful wife named Verna, played by Virginia Mayo, and he's got this team of hoodlums that he's the boss of, and they rob trains and rob banks and do bad things. But at the heart of it is Cody's mother, Ma Jarrett. Of course, she encourages her son's life of crime. She's an active participant. She's sometimes the getaway driver. She's sometimes covering up for him. She's just a terrible.
She's involved with her son.
She's very involved with her son. Exactly. She encourages his activities. Yes. But she's just this strong-willed, cold-hearted woman that just can't be trusted. I mean, there's not a better example of a heartless woman than I think than Ma Jarrett. In the end, crime doesn't pay.
Yes.
And when you've got an unfaithful wife played by Virginia Mayo who doesn't really like her mother-in-law, well, anything can happen. That's all I'm going to say. But it's a terrific performance. I mean, you really watch what she does and you see what a great actress she is. Because, before this, she was best known for playing Gary Cooper's sweet mother in Sergeant York in 1941. So again, you go from this incredible sweet mother type to the most horrible, wretched woman on screen. And it's also alluded to, I think, in the movie that there is a very strange relationship between Cody and his mother. It's almost Oedipus Rex complex a little bit. The closeness is a little too close, a little too dependent, a little too creepy. And that's another element to it that just makes this movie so psychologically interesting when you really break down the characters.
Right.
And there's nobody quite like Ma Jarrett.
Yeah.
So she gets my recommendation for one of the bad mothers of Mother's Day.
All right, I'm going to see you and raise you one bad mother here. You can't not have Regina Giddens from The Little Foxes, Bette Davis, 1941, directed by William Wyler, written by the fabulous Lillian Hellman, Arthur Coburn, Dorothy Parker, and Alan Campbell. Now, we've talked about this movie a bit, so I won't go into a lot of the amazing nominations it received, but it's set in the South. It's the story of the Hubbard family's ruthless quest for money. Essentially, they will go to any lengths for this money. In fact, their maid, Addie, played by Jessica Grayson, describes them as, they got out well off cheating the poor. These are the people we're talking about here. Now,
Yes.
I might give a Best Father award to Herbert Marshall, who plays Horace Giddens.
So great.
He's been estranged from his wife, Regina, Bette Davis, and he suffers from heart disease, but he's lured back into the family. I might give the Sweetest Aunt award to Patricia Collinge as Birdie.
I love Birdie.
Oh, she's amazing. She originated the role on Broadway. In fact, 4 members of the original Broadway cast repeat their roles in this. There's also the award for relative you don't want to show up at Thanksgiving.
Dan Duryea.
Yes, Dan Duryea. Thank you. Oh my gosh, he's just
Leo.
something.
He's terrible.
Yes. And there's another character that's been added into the film, played by Richard Carlson. He's the love interest to Regina's daughter, Alexandra Giddens, played by the lovely Teresa Wright, once again. Now, Bette Davis is not going to win any prizes for Best Mother.
No.
Regina, she masterfully controls her brothers in this story, and she is trying to get this money for this deal that they have going for a cotton mill that is going to be built. Now, I love that Lillian Hellman put at the forefront of this story a strong female character. You do not want to mess with her. In fact, you really don't want to mess with her because she essentially murders her husband for the money. As I mentioned, he has heart disease and he needs his medicine, and there's this famous scene where he ends up crawling up the stairs to try and get his medicine, and she knows he's dying and she won't help him. And the camera work on that scene is so wonderful because it stays right on Bette Davis's face as you see him crawling up the stairs behind. But really, the mother-daughter relationship, it's much more nuanced in this film than we really think. We assume that Alexandra, Teresa Wright, is going to do whatever Mama says. But in the end, when she figures out everything that's happened, she kind of thinks she knows what happened. Alexandra actually stands up to her mother and breaks free. And Bette Davis famously says to Alexandra, "Why, Alexandra, you have spirit after all. I used to think you were all sugar water," which I just love.
What a great line.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. And the fact that she does fight back. Now, we do get a sense, though, from Bette Davis as she walks up the stairs in the final scene that Regina probably won't get her comeuppance in terms of the law. Her daughter, though, is probably out of her life forever.
Dunne, yes.
And lastly, she's probably going to be haunted by her husband, Horace, because when she walks up the stairs, she's like, "Honey, will you come sleep with me?" Because she's afraid.
Well, I love that moment where Teresa Wright's character, Alexandra, says to her, "Are you afraid, Mama?
Yes.
Are you afraid?"
Are you afraid?
It's like it all comes home to roost.
It really does. So she gets my bad mama.
That's a fantastic one. And for the first time ever, I got to see The Little Foxes on the big screen at the TCM Film Festival.
Yes.
And I have to say, I've seen the movie many, many times, but seeing it on the big screen, there's so many nuances to characters that you pick up on that you really just can't see from a television set.
Yes.
And part of that was definitely Bette Davis. The side eyes she gives, the looks she gives, the volumes of dialogue she says without saying a word with her eyes is amazing.
Yeah, and she had a real strong opinion about how she was going to look in that film in terms of the white kind of makeup, the powder.
Which she and the director fought on because I think at one point he even said, we're
not doing kabuki.
We're not doing kabuki because she was so pasty and white that he hated the look. But of course, Bette Davis being Bette Davis, she won the battle. And
I think she was right.
Yeah, because it's a woman trying to stay young. It's a very vain woman who's trying to protect her youth.
Yeah. All right. Do you have a final good mama?
Oh, I have a final good mama. And this is maybe the good mama of all good mamas and the ultimate sacrifice. I mean, is there ever or was there ever a bigger sacrifice than Yocheved, the mother of Moses in the Ten Commandments? 1956, Cecil B. DeMille. We all know the Bible story. The Pharaoh of Egypt has decreed that all Hebrew boys are going to be drowned at birth. Well, Yocheved, played by the exquisite Martha Scott, who I had the pleasure of knowing a little bit in the 90s, who was just lovely. She is not having it. She is not going to have her boy basically murdered because he's born a boy and he's Hebrew. So she decides to take the baby and she hides it for several months. The baby gets a little bigger and she realizes she can't hide him much longer. So she puts the baby in this wicker basket and she floats it into the Nile River. She finds a strategic spot where she can hide it amongst the reeds and the weeds. And along with Moses' sister Miriam, They basically take the baby to save it, and she lets the baby go in the water. It's a famous Bible story. The baby's found by the Pharaoh's daughter, and the mother realizes, well, this is a better life for Moses, so I've just got to let him go.
Stella Dallas, except in biblical times.
It's the biblical Stella Dallas. That's so well said. She tells Miriam to go and watch to see what happens to the baby. So when the Pharaoh's daughter finds the baby and takes him on shore, Miriam runs over and said, oh, do you want me to go and hire a slave who can help nurse the baby? Well, of course, she goes and gets her mother, and Yocheved gets to be the nursemaid of the baby and watch him grow up.
Yes.
But having to deny her parentage of the baby,
right,
which is, heart-wrenching because, of course, he becomes Moses, and it's a beautiful story. And her performance is so understated and so elegant and so lovely that when there's that final scene where Moses realizes that she's his mother and Ann Baxter is there.
Yes.
It's funny because you look at the acting that Ann Baxter's doing and you look at the acting that Martha Scott's doing, and it's like they're in a different movie.
They're in different movies.
Yeah.
That's a really good point.
It's a testament to how great Martha Scott was.
My last good mama, Claudette Colbert as Agnes Newton Keith in the film Three Came Home from 1950. Directed by Jean Negulesco, written by Nunnally Johnson, another Nunnally Johnson screenplay.
Great writer.
Based on the book by Agnes Newton Keith. It is a true story of her imprisonment in a Japanese prisoner of war camp from 1941 until the end of World War II. This is a fascinating story. I had never seen this movie until recently. As I said, it's based on her second book. She was a writer of some renown at the time of her imprisonment. Three Came Home is the name of the original book. Shortly after the Japanese attack Pearl Harbor, they invade the island where Claudette Colbert and her husband, who's a British colonial officer, are being stationed. And they quickly separate the men from the women in a camp. Ultimately, the women and children are moved to another location called Kongqing. It's brutal. Agnes, Claudette Colbert, has a small 4-year-old son to take care of, while at the same time she's dealing with malaria, horrible living conditions, not a lot of food. There's even a scene where Claudette Colbert is eating garbage. Really brutal guards, not knowing if her husband is dead or alive. The commandant of the camp, Colonel Suga, played by Sesu Hayakawa, has read Agnes's first book, and so she is given a little bit of privilege there, which translates into a biscuit and a cup of tea occasionally.
Some privilege.
Not much. It chronicles the 3-year struggle, and it's Claudette Colbert in every single scene, standing up to brutality, physically assaulted. She nearly starves to death. Her son gets really sick, and she protects him the whole way through. The film uses a first-person narration. You think of Claudette Colbert, what do you think of? You think of...
nobility.
Yeah, and you think of comedies.
Or comedy, yes.
You think of, her performance in this, it's so surprising to me. It's really multi-layered. Not that she wasn't fabulous in Imitation of Life, and there are other serious films that she did, but the screwball comedies of the 30s and 40s are nowhere to be found in this film. The love of her child and her husband, she so strikingly conveys it. Sesu Hayakawa's performance as Colonel Suga straddles this brutality and humanity. The two of them have a heartbreaking scene at the end of the film when he realizes his whole family has been killed. She really is, you can't take your eyes off of her, and it's a really surprising Claudette Colbert performance as a mother and wife whose main goal in life is to protect her son.
Wow, I don't know this movie, so I'm so excited to see it. I'm going to end mine with maybe the worst mother of all. and we've talked about some pretty bad mothers, but this one just is pure evil. And of course, it is Roseanne Darcy, as played by Shelley Winters in the 1965 film A Patch of Blue.
Okay.
Ooh, this one still gets me. If I see this movie today, I want to go and stab Shelley Winters in the head. It's directed by Gehring, who also wrote the screenplay. It's based on the novel Be Ready with Bells and Drums by Elizabeth Cotta. This movie stars Sidney Poitier, Elizabeth Hartman, of course Winters, Wallace Ford, Ivan Dixon, Elizabeth Fraser, and John Quaylen. It was nominated for 5 Oscars, including Best Actress for Elizabeth Hartman, and it won for Supporting Actress for Shelley Winters. This was one of her 2 Oscar wins. The movie is all about a young blind girl named Selena Darcy, played by Elizabeth Hartman. She's living in this city tenement with her crude and vulgar mother, Roseanne, played played by Shelley Winters, like nobody can. And the mother is a prostitute, and they also live with sort of a senile grandfather called Old Pa, played by Wallace Ford. Well, Elizabeth Hartman, what she does to help supplement the family's income is she does beading work. She beads these beautiful necklaces and bracelets and things because she has to contribute to the family. They're very poor. Selena has no friends. She barely leaves the apartment. She's never received an education. That's what a great mother Shelley was. Well, she convinces her father one day to go to the park and let her go and bead at the park. And this is where she meets Gordon, played by Sidney Poitier, who's a very educated, soft-spoken black man working a night shift at an office. Well, the two quickly become friends. They meet at the park almost every day, and Gordon really takes her under his wing and feels sorry for her, knowing her circumstances. Well, things get really bad at home. Roseanne decides that she wants Selena to join the family business and become a prostitute.
Okay.
Which is nice mothering.
A blind prostitute.
Yes, a blind prostitute. In the end, Gordon arranges to help Selena get away from that horrible, horrible mother and family life and get herself into a school for the blind. It's a beautiful movie about love and friendship and race, and it's just really wonderful. But at the heart of it, the dark heart, is Roseanne, played by Shelley Winters. I've never seen a more villainous mother maybe on screen ever.
Wow. My last bad mom is kind of a good bad mom. It's Jo Van Fleet in East of Eden, 1955, directed by Elia Kazan. Paul Osborne wrote the screenplay based on John Steinbeck's novel. It's set in Salinas Valley around World War I. Cal, played by James Dean, competes with his brother Aaron for the love of his father and his estranged mother. Now, Cal's father, played by Raymond Massey, has told the two boys that their mother is dead. But we learn that she's not dead. She's actually running a very successful brothel in the nearby town of Monterey.
Prostitute mothers.
Yes, I know.
We've got a theme going.
We've got a theme going. So Cal goes to her, Kate, played by Jo Van Fleet, to ask for $5,000 because he's trying to recoup a huge loss that his father's lettuce business has taken. And really, James Dean's character is all about trying to get his father to love him. And so he feels if he can go and get this $5,000, he can be the savior and maybe his father will love him. And she does, in fact, give him the money. It's an amazing scene. She came from the theater, Jo Van Fleet, and you can see some of that in her performance, but it works so effectively. So she's a head of a brothel, and when your mother is the head of a brothel, things get a little complicated. So in some ways, Cal is actually kind of a chip off the old block. I mean, there's a lot of, when she describes her life and why she left them when the boys were young, you can see what why he has what he has inside of him. Mm-hmm. And she even says, nobody tells me what to do. Maybe you're more like me than you think. You got sense. You don't fall for people's slop, as she calls it. And Jo Van Fleet is, again, playing somebody much older than she really was. She's got this husky laugh and this stare that just burns right through you as you're watching her. I mean, the themes of good and evil, since this is our episode, good mothers, bad mothers, are throughout this film. People are juxtaposed against each other constantly.
Which was so very John Steinbeck.
Very John Steinbeck. I mean, it's really the story of Cain and Abel. And Van Fleet so embodies all of that, the good and the evil. With James Dean, she explains why she left. She's hard, she's soft, she's in pain, she has regrets, she's smart, she's clever, and she's bitter. I mean, her performance, it's so multi-layered, it really does make you question, is she a good mom or a bad mom?
Yeah.
She, as I said, was a respected stage actress. She had won a Tony Award for playing Jessie Mae Watts in A Trip to Bountiful.
The best.
Elia Kazan discovered her, cast her in East of Eden, and it certainly paid off because she won the Best Supporting Actress Oscar in 1956.
With
for her very first role.
That's right, which I think we talked about in our Oscar first episode.
Yes. So Jo Van Fleet, East of Eden.
Oh, that's a good one.
Okay, this has been a really fascinating time talking about movies.
I know. So whether your mother's a good mother or a bad mother, call her up.
Yeah.
Send her some flowers.
Yeah, give her a call. Before we leave you, though, we need to give the answer to our Hollywood Pop quiz.
Yes, and the question, of course, was about Barbara O'Neill, who so famously played Ellen O'Hara, the mother of Scarlett O'Hara in Gone with the Wind. And the question was, how much older was Barbara O'Neill to Vivien Leigh, who played her daughter?
I'm going to say 20 years.
All right, Lindsay's guessed 20.
I'm saying 4.
And Nan has guessed 4. It was actually 3 years. Barbara O'Neill was only 3 years older than Vivian Leigh. I think she was 4 years older than Evelyn Keyes and 7 years older than Ann Rutherford. So it was an interesting casting choice, but through costume, hair, and makeup, completely buy that is their mother.
And that's just how Hollywood rolls with women.
Yes.
Well, we hope that you'll follow us on social media. Our handle is @FromBeneathTheHollywood Sign. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and you can watch the podcast on YouTube. We'd love it if you'd subscribe.
And we'd love to hear from you. We love getting your emails, so please send us any questions, comments, anything to info@FromBeneathTheHollywoodSign.com.
That's this week's View.
From Beneath the Hollywood Sign.
You've been listening to From Beneath the Hollywood Sign with Steve Cubine and Nan McNamara, the podcast that celebrates amazing stories of Tinseltown from its golden era. Join us next week for another episode and learn something else about Hollywood you probably never knew. Take a moment and give us a 5-star rating and a positive review. And tell your friends about us too. It'll help grow the podcast. Visit Steve's website at FromBeneathTheHollywoodSign.com. The executive producers are Steve Cubine and Nan McNamara. Executive producer and post-production supervisor Lindsay Schnebley. This podcast is part of the Airwave Media Podcast Network. Visit airwavemedia.com to listen and subscribe to their other fine shows like The Box of Oddities and The Shallow End with Schnebley and Toth. Copyright 2024, all rights reserved. That's a wrap.